The game is still going, because really, the world at large hasn't changed yet. It's still the same. Plus, if we wrapped everything up, we'd have no reason to come back. And I don't think the fans would like that.
The CGI baby.
We appreciate your cooperation.
It's not really that big a deal in my opinion. Probably, if you think about it, all babies in TV shows should be CGI. Now the CGI dog, the Tar cameo, I sleep deprived, I'm dad. So I had this recurring nightmare about the way that Squid Game Season 3 would end. Gi-hun would get to the end of the game, yes, I'm pronouncing it this time. He'd get to the end of the game and it would be just him and these horrible people, and then he'd win because he's the protagonist, and he'd look directly at the camera and he'd say, "The problem isn't the Squid Games. The problem is human nature." Now instead they said something about horses.
We are horses.
I made a video a few months ago about Squid Game's second season, and in it expressed concerns about the show's message being gradually stripped away from anything that could be seen as overly political or message-y. The show has increasingly been presented as just this thing about people playing crazy murder children's games. To be clear, specifically presented that way by Netflix and other corporations and corporate marketing. Now I love corporations, I love marketing, I love corporate marketing, and I think it's a great thing that we can all enjoy. You know what I don't enjoy? Constantly being sent fake sponsorship offers by data brokers attempting to extract information from me that could destroy me and my family. Luckily I found a solution to my data broker problems. Today's sponsor, Incogni. Incogni uses an automated service to reach out to data brokers on your behalf, significantly reducing their impact on you and access to your information that could otherwise lead to spam, harassment, and in some cases identity theft and fraud. A new custom removal feature even helps maximize your online privacy by letting you submit specific requests to protect your data. Since the last time I worked with Incogni, I still get monthly privacy updates from them, and the amount of sites they have retrieved my personal information from is terrifying. And the best part is it's actually a very affordable service that comes in a range of different plan options, whether you just want to protect your own data or yourself and up to 4 additional members. Did I say that was the best part? I was lying to you. The best part is if you check out the link in the description or go to incogni.com/jsaint with code jsaint, you'll get an additional 60% off of an annual plan. Thank you to Incogni for sponsoring this video, and thank you. So Squid Game is also a show about doing things we don't want to do for money. For as much as Squid Game is a story about torture and death, it is also a story about incentives and choice. The things that make us choose to do things that cause us great harm, be it debt, addiction, hospital bills, and family. Or even just taking advantage of opportunities we think we wouldn't otherwise have. In the first season, contestants are given a one-time chance to leave the games after being clearly shown what could happen to them. They consent. In the second season, they are given this same choice every single round to make it absolutely clear the goal is not to hold them against their will.
Ensuring our players are participating in the games of their own volition is always our highest priority.
Overwhelmingly, they consent. The development of the show itself is an example of this dynamic. Squid Game creator Hwang Dong-hyuk has been pretty open about the mental and physical toll of single-handedly writing and directing the series, only being willing to even make more seasons because he needed the money. This because Netflix had used his own lower status to pressure him into a predatory deal, leaving him with no residual payments or ownership of his work. Work that has now basically single-handedly earned Netflix record-breaking profits, which seems, a little Alanis to me. Up to now, I like Squid Game because I think it reflects an experience a lot of people can relate to. Not just being forced into a bad situation, but in an uncomfortable and maybe self-consciously hypocritical way, choosing that situation.
In accordance with the results of your free and democratic vote, we will proceed with the next game tomorrow.
For as much as the setting is quite fantastical, it's not even really like an abstract metaphor. Maybe the scariest thing about Squid Game is that if enough people put enough money on a table, it could literally be made into a real-life thing. And I think a weirdly high number of people wouldn't even really object to it. Not that I'm suggesting anyone would try to make Squid Game a real-life thing, like pressuring needy people to consent to psychological torture and then broadcasting it as entertainment. What? You could say it's cynical to suggest a lot of people would defend a real-life game show that involves involves brutally murdering large numbers of poor people. I disagree. I'm not suggesting there's some deep, dark, sadistic nature to human beings in general, and I don't think Squid Game traditionally has either. The point is that anyone in a desperate situation could be influenced to put up with and ultimately normalize terrible things.
The players down there have made it this far by killing each other. Most of them are saying to themselves, if more people die, how much more money can I get?
Voting on who to eliminate in each round is the democratic option.
If a plane crashes and people are starving to death, it isn't cynical to say they may start eating human flesh. If you're seemingly trapped in poverty, constantly exhausted as you spend most of your waking hours just trying to earn enough to keep making rent or feeding your family, it isn't cynical to say maybe a life or death jackpot billion-dollar game show may sound promising to you. This isn't about moral scolding. At a certain point, we're just talking about material reality. You might even say that human beings are neither good nor bad, but simply are, like the boy says in the show.
And humans are horses.
This is not a shallow critique of humanity in general, but specifically of the rich and powerful that exploit those circumstances. This, I'd say, is the role of the salesman in the show. He embodies that shallow critique, openly mocking the nature of the homeless people who choose lottery tickets over food. But the whole point of lottery tickets is that they exploit people's capacity to understand extremely low odds on an intuitive level, and the desperation that makes them take those odds anyway. This is what people mean when they say Squid Game is a fundamentally anti-capitalist show. It points blame squarely at a system that encourages its most ruthless to take advantage of people at their lowest points. It isn't cynical because it doesn't just wave a vague hand at humanity and say people aren't capable of looking out for each other. In both seasons, Gi-hun himself reflects the desire to care for and unify with others. In both seasons, he is not alone in that struggle. Player 199 Ali counterintuitively saves Gi-hun's life in the very first episode.
You saved my life out there. You're alive. That is what matters.
Player 67 becomes one of Gi-hun's closest allies. Player 390, 149, 120, even guards are occasionally shown as caring and protective at great personal risk. These are the characters the show is clearly invested in, and it's part of why it's always seemed kinda dumb to reduce Squid Game to a show about watching people being tortured for entertainment, or comparing the show's audience with the VIPs in the story. Most people aren't watching the show to see how the nice grandma dies horrifically, but in the hope that somehow nice grandma ideally won't die, culminating in a full-on unified revolution against the Squid Games in the finale of the show's second season, leading us directly into season 3 and...
Where the fuck is that asshole?
Witness the consequences of your little game.
Okay, maybe Squid Game is a little bit cynical.
Traffic jam.
Bad people don't care. They'll ruin the world and blame everyone else. Then good people, well, the good ones always blame themselves for every little thing that happens, ripping their own hearts to shreds.
Now, I don't want to hear you say, I didn't get Squid Game Season 3. I'm the guy who says that to you. I'm the bread tuber here. So the premise here is that the frontman uses the excuse of a bloody rebellion to wipe out basically everyone with any good intentions, and then by midway through the season, it's pretty much the worst human beings on Earth, and Gi-hun, and also a CGI baby.
How about having the baby compete?
This is effectively a strategy of tension, a political maneuver whereby violent resistance and instability is actually encouraged as a way to hold on to power. The term itself comes from historic conflicts in Italy in which far-left radicals were repeatedly blamed for attacks actually conducted by far-right paramilitary groups. Most famously, the bombing of a bank in Milan that killed 17 people and wounded many more was deliberately set up by the fascist New Order group that held established ties to members of the Italian government. Far-right paramilitaries in Ireland did the same thing with the assistance of UK government. And I'm sure you can think of modern examples of basically the exact same thing. For instance, even now the Trump administration is using fierce resistance against US support of Israel's genocide of Palestinians, as well as his use of ICE as a personal extrajudicial police force, as a justification to violently root out political dissidents, conducting illegal detentions and deportations of left-wing critics under the guise of protecting US interests. That genocide itself is an example of this, with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's extremely well-documented sabotage of more moderate Palestinian groups and known support of the more radical Hamas, giving him exactly the excuse he needed to continue his illegal invasion and claim on Palestinian land. So when the frontman directly inserts himself into the Squid Games and then does everything he can to actually coax Gi-hun further into inspiring a revolution,
this is our last chance to put an end to these games and make sure they never happen again.
So how are we supposed to get the guns?
Only to then use that knowledge to brutally eradicate its supporters. Yeah, there's a pretty solid parallel. This is a connection many people who like this third season have made, and with some hindsight, I agree, it's probably one of the stronger points in the season. Without that hindsight, man, it sure was a fucking slog to watch a show where more than half the season is the biggest dipshits on the planet trying to murder a baby while the only likable character stares blankly at them like a Twitch reaction channel.
Can't you see that?
Hypocrite. Gi-hun himself spends much of the season detached and defeated. For the first couple of episodes, he's mostly stuck on a petty vendetta against player 3A, a participant in the rebellion who in a moment of cowardice fled the conflict and was spared as a result. I guess I can imagine someone watching and being completely on Gi-hun's side in blaming this one guy for fucking everything up. But on my end, I couldn't stop thinking about the ways 388's actions obviously parallel Gi-hun's own past failures. He himself used to participate in workers' strikes that descended into violence. And I think the obvious implication is his own PTSD led him to abandoning that cause and eventually becoming a deadbeat dad who gambles on his elderly mother's savings. And I'd say the parallels between these characters is also pretty intentional. In the end, when he finally does kill 388, Gi-hun turns the knife right back on himself, almost killing himself and spending later episodes in a vacant, disassociated state.
I still believe the reason you came back here is to save everyone.
I just can't be that person.
As a viewer, it is personally very frustrating to see Gi-hun effectively give up on the thing he spent the last 2 seasons desperately trying to do. And I think the back and forth you'll probably hear a lot when people talk about this season is you'll have one guy who goes, but the fact there's nobody likable left in the show is the point. But the fact that Gi-hun is totally powerless and spends most of the season sulking about it is the point. But the fact that the detective is completely ineffective and a complete waste of screen time is the point. And then the other person says, well, the point sucks, and so does the show. Rather than deepen the capitalist satire that initially made it a phenomenon, Squid Game tries to critique humanity writ large and delivers shallow thrills instead. Season 3 abandons such insight in favor of more superficial observations. The show's focus is now on how terrible people can be, whether they're one of the tournament's orchestrators or one of its contestants. I've seen a lot of variations on this opinion about Season 3, that the show did basically do the thing of my nightmares and blunt Squid Game's message into a sort of dull human nature take. And I'm really of 2 minds about it. A part of me says, no, the show is still making some pretty clear and incisive points about the nature of power and how those without that power are exploited. It would be dull to make the exact same points that the first season did, so instead the second emphasizes the twisting of democracy into a series of false choices, and the third emphasizes how even people fully rallied around a unified revolutionary movement can still ultimately be manipulated. And yeah, I do think the way the detective subplot goes basically nowhere is also part of that point. He emerges in the finale to confront his brother by yelling "why" at him, and then I guess he just goes home. And there's something in the fact that even that question is pretty straightforward. I think he did it for the money. There is no good guy with a gun that's going to stroll in and save everybody. In the moment, maybe it would have been gratifying for that to be the case, but in retrospect, it would have been a pretty convenient pandering solution to the problem of Squid Game. And this is the part where the other side of my brain lights up and says, well, at least it would have been nice to try. Here's the thing, and I think really there's a much deeper problem that Hwang Dong-kyuk was to an extent using the third season to try to work through. We don't want to say that the problem is just evil human nature. Gi-hun is not here to say people are bad. But then he's not really there to say anything about people.
We are humans.
At the end of everything, all Gyun can do is reassert his own sense of hope and justice and sacrifice himself for the sake of the baby. This is not a solution because Gyun has no solution. The show has no solution. The Squid Game will continue whether it be in South Korea or the US. And for some reason in the US, they will continue to play Korean children's games when clearly the people in this alley should be playing cornhole. This is not necessarily out of line with how the show's seasons have always ended, on a vaguely defeatist, disappointing note. It definitely felt like there was going to be more of a climax, but it still serves a message. My concern was about recuperation.
The prize up for grabs is $4.56 million. But losers will go home empty-handed. How will you play the game?
The idea of taking the pointed political meaning of the show and stripping that away so that the Netflix corporation can have a nice, simple, clean IP about the annual wacky dollhouse murder show. And honestly, if the show had ended with the detective swooping in to save the day, I think it would have been a lot closer to that. It continues to hold a meaning, even if that meaning is deeply depressing and uncomfortable. It's just also the case that the way this message plays out is kind of indistinguishable from not having one at all. There's this lingering thing that exists in my mind that I'm sure plenty of people who share my perspective also have. I refuse to be a misanthrope. I refuse to just say people are bad. For the same reason, I refuse to just say men are bad in my video where I was talking about masculinity. I'm also a person, and I don't think I'm indifferent to people suffering. I don't think I only care about my own well-being. And that's why I always talk about systems. I talk about systems that work to keep an elite class of people in control to the detriment of a majority of just normal, everyday people. This is not about human nature, this is about a constructed reality. And then a little demon pops up on my shoulder and says, doesn't the fact that this reality keeps getting constructed tell us something about human nature? I decided to make this video for two reasons. One, because I've had time to watch exactly one thing this month and wanted to talk about it. Actually, I've watched two things, but luckily Superman had no politics whatsoever. And second, because I see something in this climax that reflects something in me, and I don't like it. There's a term people often use, capitalist realism, coined by Mark Fisher to reflect an idea that there is no realistic alternative to our current economic systems. So we can point out ways powerful elites exploit the working class or global south, but we can't actually do or even think of anything else. A moral critique of capitalism, emphasizing the ways in which it leads to suffering, only reinforces capitalist realism. Poverty, famine, and war can be presented as an inevitable part of reality, while the hope that these forms of suffering could be eliminated, easily painted as naive utopianism. Capitalist realism can only be threatened if it is shown to be in some way inconsistent or untenable. If, that is to say, capitalism's ostensible realism turns out to be nothing of the sort. If I had fears that Squid Game could end up being the ultimate embodiment of capitalist realism, I can't say this finale really helped. Sure, we can say it's not recuperation because the show still has damning points about how institutions control people. The appearance of the frontman's US counterpart in the last episode is highlighting something, that this was never really a show about South Korea, reminding US viewers that these patterns persist across nations and continents. This isn't just Netflix stepping in to say, stay tuned for the spin-off, folks, this show will never end. It just happens to be that what it is doing is effectively the same as Netflix doing that anyway. If it looks like recuperation and it quacks like recuperation, at a certain point it kind of is a recuperation. If the sum total of Squid Game's meaning is to say good people exist but will ultimately be systematically eradicated by a master class whose reach is inescapable and will constantly replicate itself, I can't help feel it may as well have just ended with the detective saving the day. If the end goal was already painting efforts to resist and rebel against an oppressive system as naive, you may as well just give us the fun, naive conclusion. At least it would have been a moderately more entertaining finale than a teaser about Gyun's daughter investigating her dad's death, which, frankly, I could not care less about. Am I being cynical? No, really, I'm asking. I feel like I'm being anti-cynical. I think I wanted Squid Game to amount to more than just continued defeatism, and I don't think it did. I think instead it just kept repeating, "You are powerless," a thing that many people already think, and is probably not a great thing. I kept thinking, why did the show feel the need to have so many sympathetic characters not die at the end of the last season, and then unceremoniously kill them all off in the first few episodes of this season anyway? Why even keep Hyunju in the show if you're just going to use her as a brief prop to make us hate the crypto guy more and then forget about her completely? The art brain tells me the brief hope of their survival makes the gut punch of their deaths feel all the more powerful. The corporate brain tells me they wanted people to keep tuning in, so they briefly strung us along before the season fully revealed itself as a devastating disappointment. I think there's a distinction there. I just wonder if what it amounts to is a distinction without a difference. Not long ago, I argued pretty firmly that it's not the responsibility of art to give audiences catharsis or any constructive conclusion. It'd be hypocritical for me to then condemn Squid Game because what it reflects is a disappointing but extremely relatable feeling of hopelessness. But that still leaves me to reflect on that art and my own feelings of hopelessness and see it for what it is. Indistinguishable from basically agreeing with the status quo. Recently, the YouTuber ContraPoints put out a statement on the Palestinian genocide that a lot of people, including myself, did not appreciate. If I had to focus down on one relevant part of her statement, it would be this. Much of the online left spent all of 2024 single-mindedly focused on Palestine and the complicity of democratic politicians in sending aid to Israel. This campaign had the following effects. 1. 0 Palestinian lives were saved, not one fewer bomb or bullet was fired by the IDF. 2. It may have slightly contributed to the re-election of Trump. Maybe it's just the fact that I read this statement around the same time I finished Squid Game Season 3, but I can't help but see the same kind of reductive defeatism echoed in both of these things. Is it a meaningless thing that Israel is now being widely condemned for its genocidal actions around the world? Is it a meaningless thing that more people than ever are heavily invested in the plight of the Palestinian people? Is it a bad thing that people are willing to make a single issue campaign out of the lives of people they don't know and will most likely never meet? There is a point to be made about being pragmatic, about living in material reality. It's another way I interpret Gi-hun's final message. Humans are, as in to say, humans exist. Humans are material. But if the season as a whole reflects anything to me, I'd say it's growing discomfort with this constant, hopeless resignation. People are stuck in the simultaneous desire to express a feeling of being trapped and also to reject a status quo that tells them their only real choice is the lesser of two tremendous evils. And I guess in depicting that contradiction, maybe there is a value to what Squid Game ended up amounting to. Or, maybe it's just not the responsibility of a Netflix show to inspire revolutionary praxis. Is this a question of a lack of vision or direct corporate meddling? Maybe the problem is how hard it is to tell the difference. My baby is currently crying in another room, so I'm going to stop talking now. Thank you all for joining me. If you like the video, you like, and I actually do want to read comments on this because I don't think I'm really done with my thoughts on this, but if you especially like the videos, feel free to throw a tip so you can be on the credits that are scrolling by now. I upgraded my setup a little bit. I'm pretty sure there's going to be tons of technical problems, but I think it could be pretty cool. I'm not holding the microphone anymore, so that's thank you for watching. Thank you very much for watching, and bye. Hey, so I had a couple of other opinions that I forgot to say in the video that I wanted to just quickly say here. So as a point of praise, I actually kind of like how they have the thing where there's all these privileged assholes, and then they immediately decide that of all the people they want to get rid of, it's like the mentally ill drug addict. I think there's some good commentary there. And I thought that was going to lead more naturally into a sort of conclusion where it's like the twist is that they all just start picking each other off. and then it actually shows a kind of inherent contradiction within kind of capitalism through the metaphor of the show, where it's like, aha, in the end they just eat themselves, but in the end instead it's just like a kind of fight scene-esque thing. I just feel like that message could have been delivered a little bit more there. Also, one bottle for the baby, one bottle. I mean, there's a lot of things wrong with the baby. As a new dad, one bottle of milk seemingly, and other than that, and also the fact that like I didn't realize she was that pregnant. I know some people just they don't show at all and then they just suddenly having a baby, but yeah, like the way that she just, her water breaks and then within the span of like 10 minutes she has a baby, and then the baby's born, and then the baby is being like tossed around. That baby would be dead as hell. And then final thing, if Gi-hun comes back in another season, it turns out actually he was alive and they bring him back, I'm probably gonna kill